In this lesson, we're going to go through your data actions. This is a list that you will spend a lot of time with as you're building your application, because this is where you modify your database. This is where you create records, you update them, you can delete them, you can copy records. So we're going to talk about each one so you see what all the options are. You can start to play around with this and get comfortable with it. So the very first one is creating a new thing. This is where everything really begins with your database. This is so that your users can generate records through a workflow. You'll most likely have inputs on the page to store specific values to all of the fields that you've set up. But in general, when you run, let me go back to workflow here. When you run this action, it will create a new record of whatever thing you define. So let's start with an example of creating a new job post. Okay, so I'm going to remove this icon here, and we're going to trigger this from the submit button. We'll add inputs as we need them, but just to kind of start out, we're going to create a new thing. Bubble needs to know what type of thing we're creating, so I'm going to select job post. Remember that the user type is a special built-in type that has its own action for creating new user records, and that is the sign the user up action or the create an account for someone else action. So you won't find user as an option here for creating a new thing. We're going to select job post. Now, to save specific values to all of the fields that you've created for the post, you'll simply select set another field and choose your field that you want to save. So for example, title, we'll do some other ones here. We'll do description and start date. And you'll choose inputs on the page to insert values dynamically. Now, maybe your fields are not being saved with dynamic values. It's possible that you might have static values. That is okay too. You can type in static values so that every time a job post is created, for example, this description will always equal sample description. It's really up to you for when stuff gets saved. If you choose not to save a specific field, and I say I don't want to save a description when the post is first created, then you simply do not include it. It's really just what you want to modify or save for the first time upon creation. So I'm going to add a field here for the job post title. I'll just give it a placeholder job title, and we'll do a date picker for the start date of the job. So that'll be added here. Okay, so two simple fields so that we can save these two values. So I'll create the title for input job title's value, and the start date will be the date picker's value. Okay, now if I already know what some of these values should be, even if they're dynamic, I can go ahead and set those too. So for example, I want logged in company users to create job posts. So I will already know which company that job post belongs to. I do not need the user to select their own company from a drop-down or anything like that. So what I can do here is say, the company for this post is going to equal the current user's company, whatever it might be. It'll just match that logged in person because they are already associated with the company, and I want the job post to be associated with that same company. Okay. In addition, because my company data type has this field to link to a list of jobs, I can also add another action to update the company record. Simply by saving a company to the job post does not automatically update the company record as well. Bubble has no idea that this is a two-way relationship between where is it here? Job post and company, and then the reverse of company and its list of jobs. You have to specifically update both sides if that's the structure that you've created in your database. That's very important to remember because I've worked with plenty of people who assume that by saving this one direction link that the other direction is automatically going to fill in for them. Bubble does not know that, nor can it assume that, because your fields are completely custom. You have to give it specific instructions to do that update. So I'm going to add a new action here, which is to make a change to a thing. And the thing that I'm changing is the company record. So I am assuming that the company already exists before the job post has been created. This is the scenario that I'm building out for this particular action, which is to create a job post. There might be cases where you also need to create the company in the same workflow. It's very possible. So what you would need to do is create the job post, not store the company, then create the company, and then update the job post, and then update the company so that the relationships can happen in both directions. I'm going to keep this simple though. We are going to assume that the company already exists by the time the job post gets created. So we'll leave the company under job post here, add it in, but we do want to update that company as a second step. So the thing to change is going to be the current user's company. Another way to reference this company record, it would be the exact same record, is to go through the result of the previous step. I can take the result of step 1, which is a job post, and navigate to that job post company. And I know there will be a value there because I have already saved it here in this first step. By doing result of step 1, I'm telling Bubble to run this action first, no matter what, and then run the second action. But if I know that the user will already have a company saved to their user record, then this is just as secure, just as reliable. Either way, the specific scenario that I am creating here, though, is that we still need the job post to get created, because otherwise we would have nothing to save. We would have nothing to update the company with if the post doesn't exist. So what I'm going to change about the company is the list of jobs field, right? So this is the company record to update list of jobs. So I'll select that field. I don't need to select all of the other ones. I'm not concerned about those other ones. And by not selecting them when I'm making a change to it, it doesn't mean I'm going to delete their values. I'm not going to overwrite them in any way. I'm simply just going to leave them unchanged. Now, this particular field is a list of jobs. So my operations here are related to list modifications. If I add something, Bubble is looking for one job to add to the list. If I remove something, it's looking for one job to remove from the list. We'll talk about these list operations in more detail in a couple lessons coming up. But for this particular workflow, what I want to do is add the result of step 1 to the company's list of jobs. So I'll select the value here, result of step 1. So now we've updated the company so that the list of jobs is updated and it has this new job in its list. Okay, so we've created a new record. We've updated a separate record. We've linked them together. And let's go ahead and also show a quick alert message to let us know that we've succeeded, because these actions are making changes in the database. The user's not going to see that happening unless we show some kind of alert message, or we have a list of jobs that's displayed on the page at the same time and they can see that list populate. But for our scenario here, I'm just going to show an alert message. This is the alert that I've already got on the page. So let's preview that. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to also reset the inputs so that my title and date picker clear out after I submit this form. So we'll preview the page, and I'm going to say engineer is the job title, and we'll choose some date here for the start date, and we'll do submit. Okay, very fast, very easy, not a lot of work for Bubble to create that record. We saw our alert message. We see that the inputs have been reset. Now I'm going to go over to data and then app data, check out my job post database. And I can see here is my engineer job record. And I can see that let's see, I was running as a user that didn't have a company. I'm going to rerun that so that I do have a company associated. Let's change my company reference here. Let's do City University for this user that I'm currently running as will be my company. Okay, so I'm going to run this as this person just in case to make sure that I am logged in. Okay, so let's say professor is the job title, and I'll go over to another date, submit. Okay, so it has created that record, and it should have also updated the City University company record. Let's go to the job post first. And I can see here is this is the record that was just created. Professor was the title. The company was saved as my company, which is City University. The description is a default value that I have currently saved to the job post, just default settings here. So that's why that was automatically filled in. I didn't set this in the workflow. And then the start date was what I had set up in the date picker. The draft status for this job post was also another default value. So I did not save this in the workflow. It's just coming from our defaults there. And I believe those are all of the fields. So then if I go over to the company data type and I go to the list of jobs for City University, I can see that professor is one of the ones that is linked to this company record. So we can see that both of our actions worked properly. The post was created and the company record was updated. So this is really where you are going to be spending most of your time, especially if your app is very data driven, is creating records and making changes to records as well. And there's a lot of manipulation you can do between those two, having things run in specific orders so that they can kind of talk to each other. But I do encourage you to create these creation and change workflows so that you can get comfortable with them, because that's what your users are going to have to trigger when they are the ones that are updating your database, as opposed to you manually entering new entries or updating them from the back end. Okay, so I'm going to remove, well, let me just create another button here just so that we can keep that there for now. We'll say go is going to be our new button here. Okay, so the next action in this list is making a change to a list of things. This is very much like the make a change that I had here to a company, except this is looking for multiple items of one type. This is useful if you need to run kind of a bulk update to multiple items and you know the value that will be saved for each one of those items. So for example, this is actually a good example here. Let's update all of my users. I currently have users with a first name and a last name, but no full name. This is a field that I have created, but have not yet filled in. So here's a great use case for running a change on multiple items all at once. So when I click go, I will run this action, make a change to a list of things. The type of things is going to be the user type. And the list to change, I'm going to change all users in my database. Now, I know that I have a couple users without first and last name. Well, actually, I'll create a filter so that we can leave these people out because they're not going to be changed anyway. What I'm doing, by the way, is combining their first and last name to save their full name. So the list to change will be a search for users because we want to find the users we want to update. So I'll do a search of my database. I'll select user. That's the list, or that's the data type I want to pull the list from. And this does have to match the type that I've defined here. So it's compatible. It's in blue. And I'm going to add a quick constraint here. I only want to work with users where the first name isn't empty and the last name isn't empty and the full name is empty. Now this last one here where full name is empty, that's probably not too necessary, But if, let's say, my database of users was, thousands and thousands of records, I don't want Bubble to go through the trouble of updating records that don't need to be updated. So this is a performance thing. If I create enough constraints so that I know that Bubble is really only updating the records that need to be updated, I will add those extra constraints. In our case here, we've only got 8 entries. So in reality, I don't even need to have any constraints because it's just not a lot of work for Bubble to update 8 records. And anyone who has first and last name empty won't have any visible change anyway, because what we're wanting to do is give the full name field a value, and it's just not going to matter for people who don't have first or last name to begin with. But do keep this in mind. The constraints you add will change the list that you're providing here. And if you are working with a very large database, you do want to be as specific as possible and really only have Bubble retrieve the items that are necessary for this workflow. I don't really need to worry about sorting my list. It doesn't really matter what order the list is retrieved. And I think those are all the constraints. Okay, so now that I have my list, only people who do not have a first or last name, first and last name, where those are both empty, and the full name is empty, what we're going to do is change their full name field. And the value of this field is going to be a dynamic value because every user is going to have its own full name, right? So I will insert dynamic data, and we're going to reference each user individually. And so to do that, this option here becomes available. This X, whatever the data type is. In this case, it's a user. So we want the full name to equal this user's first name. And I'm going to click out here and type in a space on my keyboard, and then insert dynamic data again, this user's last name. Okay, so that's going to equal the new full name for each individual user. This user refers to individual user within the list so that they're all different. I could, if I wanted, give them all the exact same full name by, typing in something static like, sample name, something like that. They would all have this, but that's not what I want. All right, so I'm going to run this action so you can see this working. I'm going to trigger a show alert message so that we can see something on the page at the very least, so we know that it's gone through. But here's our action. We're making a change to a list of users, and that's the change we're making. So let's refresh the page. And this is coming from my Go button. Just one more time before I click that button, we're going to see here's the first names, last names, and the full name should fill in. And it should actually not fill in for this record because he has a first name, but he does not have a last name. We're only looking for people with a first and last. So let's click that button. It's going to think for a second. All right, success. Now let's check out our database. I'm going to refresh the data, and we can see all of these were filled in exactly how we wanted. Okay, and this one was excluded from that search, so it did not get updated, which is what I expected. And of course, these didn't have anything to begin with. Great. All right, so that is making a change to a list of things. It's just going to update multiple records in bulk. Do keep in mind that the list that you're going to change, the size of the list should be somewhat small. If you plan on making a change to thousands and thousands of records, I highly recommend you do that in your API workflows instead, not in a workflow on the page here like we've just done, because you're going to want Bubble to run that type of a workflow in the background. If the user decides to change the page or close their browser while this action is still processing, it's going to end the action. It's just going to terminate it in the middle of it. So it could cut things off. Some users could go unchanged when they needed to be changed. You don't want to run into that type of situation. So instead, you'll want to run a very big action on a much bigger list of users or whatever it might be in your API workflows. And we'll talk about that in later lessons for how to run actions like this on the server side. In other words, in the background where the user does not need to be present on the page for it to complete. Okay, so the next action in our data list is delete a thing. This is very self-explanatory. It's simply looking for a record to completely delete from your database. And in this case, you do not need to define the type of thing. You just need to specify one record of something. So if I wanted to delete my own user account while I'm logged in, I would simply say delete current user. This would completely remove that user account. Or I could delete something from my database that I do a search for. So I can search for a company, for example, and right now it's showing red because the result of a search is always a list value. And this action is looking for one record to delete. So we need to specify this expression a bit more and whittle it down to one single record. I could do first item. If I know exactly which company to delete by using a specific constraint. So for example, search for company where the name equals city university. And that's a static value. This could also be a dynamic value if I wanted. But if I know that this constraint will always return one item, then doing a search and selecting the first item will guarantee that I'm deleting the one record I know is going to come back as the only result. Or depending on what you can anticipate about this search result, you can choose the last item. Depending on how you sort the list too will also matter. If you're searching, if you want to delete something that was last created, then you could sort by the creation date. Sort this by descending. So the last one that was created, the most recent one, is at the front of the list, and you can select first item there. Or if you wanted to reverse it and you are sorting where the earliest is at the front, but deleting the last one is what you want, then you would want to select last item like that. So many different combinations of things. Bubble really just makes it as flexible as possible for you. Yeah, and so that's essentially all it is you just define the exact record that you want to delete here. If I wanted to delete my own company, then I could do something like current users company. I don't necessarily need to search the entire database of companies. That's another area where performance really can be affected. Anytime you search through your database, Bubble has to sift through all of the records in that table. Whereas having a direct link to a record through some other thing that you have a shortcut to, like this, current user's company, there's no searching for Bubble to do at all. This company is already linked to the user. It's a much faster retrieval of that record for Bubble, and the workflow will just run that much faster. So if this was what I wanted to delete, I can go through the user record to do that, to find that company. Okay, now the next action is delete a list of things. It's the exact same concept as making a change to a list and then deleting. You really just need to define the type of things first. So if I was deleting a list of applications that were fulfilled or something, maybe I'm clearing things out and I don't want them to be stored in the database anymore, then I could do a search for applications where the status equals fulfilled, or, archived, or whatever it might be. This does not require any extra modification because this particular action is going to delete a list of things. And again, the result of a search is always a list value. So this is all it needs to know to delete those applications. Okay, the next action in our list here is copying a list of things. Now, this is a really tricky one. It's actually not one that I see used very frequently, but when you do need it, it is super, super handy. What this does is create complete duplicates of records in your database. And it is labeled as copying a list of things, but you can also use this to copy individual records. I will show you a little trick here to show you how to do that. The first thing that you need to do to set this up is you need to define what type of things are you copying. So let's say company, and I'm going to run this action so you can actually see a copy happening. And the list to copy, well, let's see, let's do a smaller list first. Let's do job we'll do companies, that's fine. So we're going to copy all of our companies. So the list to copy will be a search for companies, and let me see if there is a constraint that I can put on here. Let's copy only the companies that Monica here is the manager for. So we can see that there's 2 of them. So I want to copy this John's Inc. and also Italian restaurant. So I'm going to grab her email really quick because I'm going to use that as one of my filters. So we'll search for companies where the manager equals, now this field is looking for a user. Okay, so I cannot just enter in an email address. That's not how it works. The manager field is linked to a user record. What I can do is another search. Okay, we haven't done this yet, and so this is a good place to show you how to really expand the functionality of these constraints. I need to look for a specific user record to have an accurate filter for this other search. So I'm going to search for users where the email equals my static value of monica@sample.com. So I'm going to back out of this nested filter for a second. I'm going to select again on search for companies to open up my window. So to filter my companies, I want to make sure that the manager is only the user where the email equals monica@sample.com. So I've already set up my search for users. I've added in that email constraint. I'll click on it again so you can see it here. Okay, and I'm going to back out of it again. Now it's showing me in red because this manager field is looking for a single user record. So I will click more and hit first item because I know that there's only one user in the database with that email address. So this is a safe assumption to do this expression like this. Search for users and bring back the first item in that search with this email address. Okay, so I'm going to click back here. Another way to do this before I move forward here, I'm just going to copy this expression because I'm going to remove it to show you an alternate method, is I'm going to remove this constraint. Another way to do this is to filter the search with a different type of filter. So I'm going to I'm just going to search for this here, filter. And you can see that with filters, it works very much like the regular constraints within a search. But this is an additional filter that you add after the search. This is something you do want to be a little bit careful with, especially if your filters are really complex or your list of things is very big, because the filters happen on the client side, meaning that this is work being done on the browser end, not on Bubble's servers. So the performance is very different. You do want to keep things on the server side as much as possible. Server side constraints, I should say, happen here, wherever you see the word constraint. Filters, on the other hand, they're also labeled constraint, but filters are going to be applied client side if you're using this modifier here after the search, because Bubble will first perform the search with whatever server side constraints and then filter that result on the browser side, on the client side. Just want to make that distinction. Now, with the filters, you do have a lot of the same options. You can still filter by all of the same fields, but the difference is that you have an advanced option here that is not available on the server side constraints. So if you need to use an advanced filter, then you have no choice. You have to use this filter, browser side filter operation. And it does give you really great customized results. So, depending on what you're doing and what the size of your list, this might be worth the client side operation. So I'm just going to show you an alternate of filtering our companies by a manager with a slightly different expression. So we'll take all of our companies, no constraints, and then add this filter. And this is going to be an advanced one where this company manager email address is, and I'll paste in my static value, monica@sample.com. This will return any companies where this is true, where this company's manager's email is monica@sample.com. So you see the difference between this expression and the way we were able to write this very specific constraint We're finding companies by a specific user based off a specific email. It was easier to write this in the advanced field here, whereas I'm going to paste back what I had in before. Doing a search for companies where the manager is the result of another search for users. It's just a different way to do it. It will still get you the same result, but depending on, again, the size of your list, the performance might be different. In this case, I'm going to leave it as this double search because we're keeping more of this on the server side. Now, one other thing that I want to note is that your bubble plan is going to limit you to how many items you can copy at one time, every time you run this action. So right now, let's see, the plan that my current app is on, it's limiting me to 100 items. I cannot retrieve a list of over 100 items and copy them. So Bubble's just will not run the action to begin with if your list is over that limit. You will see this number change based on the plan that your application is on. Okay, so here's my action. I've set it up to only copy. We've got two records here. So let's check it out and see what happens. I'm going to show again my alert message and we'll refresh the page. So I'll hit go. Okay, so we've succeeded. Now I'm going to refresh my data. And here we go. Here are our two other records. I'm going to filter my company view, or actually I'll just sort this by the manager. So I can see these 4 records here. The first 2 were created yesterday. These other 2 were created at the same time, just right now. So these top 2 are the duplicate, and you can see all of the values carried over. That's what this is for. It's for creating complete copies. All right. So now let's say you want to only copy 1 record. All right. So let's say I wanted to copy my own company. What I would do for that is set this value to current user's company. But note that by doing that, it's in red because it's saying, hey, we need a list. This is looking for a list value, but you are providing us with one single company record. So how do I convert this to a list value so that it's compatible? Well, Bubble actually has a very specific modifier here, converted to list, so that the single value can be recognized as a list value. It's essentially putting an item of 1 in a list of 1, but the value itself is a list and it's not just one thing. So this makes it compatible with this type of action. So that's why there's not a separate action here for copy a thing and then copy a list of things. You can actually use this for both. So I'm going to refresh the page. Again, I'm running as a user whose company is City University, and we're going to see just the 1 record get duplicated. We currently have 9 entries. We should have 10 after I click this button. So I'll click that, success, and let's go back to our database. I will refresh. And there's our copy, City University. I'm going to sort this so we can see them together. There they are. Excellent. So that's very handy if you do need to create copies, if your users need to generate duplicates of anything. From here, if you wanted to modify the copy, then what I would do is make a change to it would be a list of things because, again, the result of this is a list. So in this case, I would do company, and the list to change would be the result of step 1. And let's say that I want to change the name, and I want to make it very clear that this new duplicated record is a copy. I would do something like this. The new name of the copied item or the copied list is going to be this company. So it's just referring to each company in the copied list. This company's name. Well, we'll do this. We'll do copy of, like that in the front. So a combination of a static value and then the dynamic name. All right, so I'm going to run this again. And I will click go. And we'll go back to revisit our data. And I can see here is my newest copy with the name that has been updated. Everything else stays the same because I didn't make any changes to that field, but here I did modify the name in the same workflow as creating that record. So again, what I did was I added an action to make a change to a list of things. The list to change is the result of the previous step, and the name is this updated value that I'm giving it here. And it's actually a combination of some static text plus a dynamic name, which is what it already has in there. All right, so let's see what other actions we have available. So we have CSV actions. I'm going to create another button here so that we can see how the CSV items work. CSV. Okay, start edit workflow. When this button CSV is clicked, let's take a look at our CSV actions. The first one is to download data as a CSV. This is another feature that Bubble has tiered off based on the plan that you are on. You do have to be on at least the lowest paid plan for this to work. It is not available on free plans. Basically, this generates a CSV file of whatever data you define here. So you can only download CSV files one at a time per data type. I cannot create a CSV that combines all of my data into one single file. So I would select, for example, user, and then I would need to say, all right, which users do you want to include in this file? Because you can choose, it's not going to be all of them. So I could do a search for users, users, and I add constraints or not constraints if I do want all of my users. I can change the file name, and this can be a dynamic value. What I usually like to do with exports is have like the date and time in the name. So I could do export like that as a static value and have current date and time so that it gets inserted as a part of the name. So that every time I run this, I'll have a different value here and I can keep my files apart. You have a couple options for your formatting, your separators, and then if you want to exclude any of your fields from the CSV, you'll want to check those boxes here. So if I don't want the Bubble unique ID to be included, I can check that box. It won't appear in the file. Same for any of these other fields. Okay. And and this will generate a file for your browser to download to your computer. And again, you have to be on a paid plan. For the opposite, so for uploading data into your Bubble database via a CSV file, you do have that as a separate action here. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to remove this one here. And this does take a little bit more setup to get right. The first thing to note is that this is also a paid feature. You have to be on the first paid plan for this to work. But the way that it works is you'll select the data type so that, by the way, so this action is specifically for having your users add data to the database in bulk via CSV file. So you would have to provide a file uploader for them to select a file first, and then have Bubble read that file and create records for every row in the file. So what I would do is have this file uploader on the page. Okay, they can click this and select a CSV from their computer, and Bubble will, when you click the button to trigger the workflow, Bubble will look for the file that has been saved to that uploader. So I'll select CSV file equals whatever the value is of this uploader. And you have to specify what table this is going to. So let's say that users are adding in job posts that they've already created in a spreadsheet, and they now want to upload that data into the application so that they can use it in your app. So we would select that job post, and then there's no other setup involved. The requirement is that the column headers of their CSV that they have created need to match your field captions exactly. So if we're uploading job post data, their CSV files need to have this field written out like this, all of them spelled out exactly the same way. I do recommend helping them label their CSV by specifically saying, hey, these are the fields that, or these are the column headers that you need, and this is how you should spell them. In fact, I would go one step further and allow them to download a template CSV with all of that already set up. And that way they can use the template for their own data and everything. You're more sure that they're uploading it in the right format. What I would recommend for providing a template is adding a link element here and setting this link destination to an external URL and adding in some online location for where that CSV is stored, that template CSV. It could be a Google Sheet, whatever it might be, so that they can download that template with it already pre-filled with the column headers with your specific wording here. That's the one requirement that this action needs, because that's how Bubble's going to know how to map their data to your database structure. Now, this is also a tiered thing. Once you are on a plan, you're going to see how many lines you can upload at one time, meaning per run of this action. I believe the first level lets you upload 50 lines. And then after that, it kind of increases from there. So make sure that that is also clear in your instructions to your users, because if their list size is much bigger, then the action just won't run to begin with. Okay, the next action here is deleting an uploaded file. Now, this is very important because your application does have a limit to the file storage. Every application comes with 10 gigs of files. You can add extra file storage. It's an additional $10 a month for every 10 gigs. Please check with the updated pricing on Bubble's pricing page. I'll go to it here. It's bubble.is.pricing, because this might change. Right now, it's $10 a month for every 10 gigs. If you go to let's see, read more, and then under file storage, here you go. There's the info. So that's what the current rate is. But your app does already come built in with 10 gigs. If you go to settings and then app plan, and near the bottom of your app plan area, you're going to see how much storage you have. And more importantly, under data, and then File Manager, this is where you can actually see all the files that have been uploaded to your application. If I click on search right now, I should have a few things. So I have a bunch of things, all these pictures that I've been uploading, the profile pictures, any documents, for example, with our job application app, we're going to have our applicants uploading their resumes. So that's certainly something that's going to be adding up over time. All of those files get stored to your app's file storage, just allocated storage location. And you do want to keep control over the size of the files and just monitor to make sure that you're not hitting your limit. If you are, you'll want to add extra storage by going to settings, and then down at the bottom here, you can add additional storage by increasing your app plan with that add-on capacity. Now, if you go back to data and then file manager, you can sort your list by its file size to see what might be taking up a lot of space. The important thing to note is that even if you delete a record in your database that references one of these files, it will not also delete the file itself, okay? The file will still be stored on your your application's storage area. So, for example, if we have under application, we have a field here for resume. If you delete an application record, say that the user decides to delete it or the company does, it's not going to delete the resume file that might have been uploaded here. It will still be in your app. So Bubble has a specific action for deleting the actual files. I would suggest if you are to have an action, I'm going to use the CSV button here. change it to delete application. What I would do, anything that involves a record linking to uploaded files, is the first thing is delete any files that are associated with that record before deleting that record. So here, when delete application is clicked, we're going to delete an uploaded file. Remember, this is from our data list. This is the last one here. And the file URL will be some application. So let's just say, for example, I'm deleting some random application here. We're just going to select first item. So I did a search for application first item. And then I'll navigate to that resume field because that's the actual file value. Okay, so I'm deleting that first. And then I can run my delete application action. So again, right now I'm just randomly choosing one. I'm just going to search for applications and select the first thing. But this way, I ensure that everything that was associated with this application record, specifically the files, are also completely removed from the app, and it frees up that storage space in your application. All right, so that was the last data action. We will move on to email next.